A few days later, the forge went up in flames and then collapsed. My brother didn't survive it. I don't know if he was burned or beaten to death. I only know that I didn't cry. My aunt couldn't take care of me on her own and sent me back in. In the upper city, it was clear to everyone that I came from the undercity, because of my clothes and my unkempt hair and such. I was already 5 years old and saw Glacio for the first time. I hid and watched him lovingly play with his sister Genevieve in front of his huge house. He was so good with her that I liked him right away. But I stayed hidden, and in the evening I returned home without money. Just then 2 knights came to my aunt's house. They wanted to collect taxes, and when they saw me they recognized me, the girl who went begging upstairs. It was forbidden to be seen in the upper city for someone from the undercity, and I was everywhere, not only in the middle class but also in the aristocratic district, and that was an even bigger crime. My aunt told me to run away. She wouldn't let them kill me. I obeyed her, but I only did that because I saw that the tin cans already... It was a long night then, and I didn't know where to go. I didn't really know anyone in the undercity. My brother forbade me to leave the house. Somehow I remembered Glacio and I went to the house where I had last seen him. But I couldn't discover him. Only his sister, who was 1 year older, was back in front of the house in the afternoon and played with dolls in the grass. I watched it because it distracted me from hunger, thirst, exhaustion, grief, and tiredness. When it got dark, I got closer to the house and looked inside through the windows. The pharmacy and healing practice area confused me because I had never seen anything like it before, and the living area was gigantic and beautifully furnished. I started dreaming until I heard voices. Again I hid and saw Commandant Atropax and Glacio standing on the street. They said goodbye to each other, and the icicle was just about to go to his house when he somehow noticed me and found me. My condition really frightened him, and he asked me to wait a moment. He got a plate of food from the house and gave it to me. A warm blanket was also included. Then he showed me a place in the basement of his house where I could sleep. I was so glad he helped me. After a few days, when we had already become good friends, even though he almost was never there because he always did his training and was taught at the tin cans, he introduced me to his parents and persuaded them to help me. I was even allowed to live in his house for a few days. I got a dress from his sister which was so incredibly beautiful, and she wanted to throw it away because she didn't like it anymore. But this silence was short-lived, for soon the tin cans became aware of it. I was a thorn in their side, and even more so at the time because I had contact with the Chosen One. Genevieve never liked me and did everything she could to persuade her parents to throw me out. She even accused me of theft and things like that, but Glacio always defended me. Over time his parents changed more and more and didn't like me so much anymore. I didn't feel comfortable in the house anymore. Then 2 knights came and said that they had a better home for me, with foster parents who take care of me all by themselves. The operation was that I let a few, according to the tin cans, harmless experiments do with me. Somehow it seemed strange to me that they suddenly wanted to help me, but since I didn't feel comfortable anymore anyway, and Glacio's parents advised me to do it all the time, I accepted the offer. A big mistake. It wasn't until later that I learned that the Light Knighthood was threatening them, so they had to get me to accept the offer. The way to the laboratory in the upper city was full of anticipation of a real home and the last beautiful experience I had as a child. The last minutes in which I felt freedom, could breathe the fresh air, could see the chroma stars in their brightest colors and the source of life in all its splendor. Then I was locked in a cell in the laboratory and my data was taken. The researchers there never paid attention, and everything they did caused me pain. I was often sick and so exhausted that I could not get up for a few days and had to sleep on the hard wooden board hung to the wall that served as a bed, from which I had always felt all the bones after sleeping. Sometimes it was so incredibly cold that I thought I was going to die. Glacio was also in the lab almost every day. Experiments were also carried out on him, although he always refused. Since he was already doubted, the researchers were only cautious about him when he was not alone. Most of the time Atropax was with him. Every time the icicle was there, he came to me and asked how I was doing, while we had to wait for the results of the tests and experiments. We became such good friends that he was really with me every day, as often as he could. He slept less so that he could pay me a visit in the morning before his lessons. Then he was always there at noon because he slowly started to do his own research and various tests were still being carried out with him. And in the evening he was with me very late until the laboratory was locked and the researchers went home. It was rarely open overnight because of nightly experiments. Until Glacio was 10, he wasn't allowed in my cell, but then he started to resist all experiments and stole the key to my cell, made it, and had some spare keys. I was already such an important test subject back then that the Tincans and their researchers couldn't let him free me, so they made a deal with the icicle that he had to swear on his parents' lives. He would never break his promise because everyone knew how much he had loved his family. But through this agreement, he was allowed to take me out of the laboratory once a week into the fresh air, into freedom. And he could visit me as much as he liked, as long as he performed his other duties. When I was 13 and he was 14, we spent a lot more time together. He didn't have to be taught so much anymore because he already knew almost everything at that point. So he started to do more research and wanted to do something about the global aluminium shortage. I always watched him eagerly create formulas and calculate all kinds of complicated things at an insane speed. I found that pretty impressive and, well, it may sound strange now, but he was the only one I had at the time and he helped me so much and did everything in his power for me and more. He spent so much time with me and you really have to admit he is extraordinarily handsome. He was already back then. Of course, I would never tell him that or admit it, but just between us. In any case, I fell in love with him, and it seemed to be mutual. We got together just before my 14th birthday, and I loved him so much you can't imagine, Cheyenne. When I was 14, the horror started again. General Agamemnon got wind of Glacio's and my relationship and often came to the laboratory with the icicle to supposedly look over his shoulder. Yes, of course. In any case, it is already clear that someone who does not even have the beginning of a brain should understand what Glacio is calculating. He just stared at me the whole time when he came along. The icicle made sure that I was always well groomed and sometimes bought me nice clothes, and he always told me how pretty I was. Agamemnon probably thought so too. Or no, actually I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe nothing at all. I don't want to know at all. In any case, he came more and more often. Glacio didn't like that either, but he couldn't do anything to keep his mentor away from the lab. After all, he is a ruler, and he also trained Glacio in part. One night, after the lab was already closed, he came into my cell and locked the access door behind him. For the first time since Sasha began to talk, she was silent for a moment. She obviously had to collect herself and wipe the tear from her face. The young woman seemed annoyed by her emotions and shook her head before continuing. He came to me and held his strong, rough hand over my mouth so that I could not scream, although even that no one would have heard. The lab was small, and at that time I was the only one there because the other test subjects had died from experiments. Agamemnon has sat down on the wooden bed next to me. I tried to remove his hand from me, but he was too strong. When I started kicking and fidgeting, he hit me until I was quiet and dizzy. Then he touched me and slowly bent over me. He came closer and closer to me, and he has... Again, Sasha had to pause from speaking, and Cheyenne already suspected what had happened back then. She was horrified and shocked, but hoped that what she believed was not true. But her suspicion was confirmed when her friend had collected herself and continued to talk as well as she could in her trembling state. He held me. The clothes were torn from my body. He partially exposed himself. Then he was on top of me and lay on me, and then he raped me. It was so terrible. On top of that, I was a virgin up to that point. I was so next to me, I couldn't even think or scream. It was so terribly painful and unpleasant, but it didn't bother him, this damned ruthless, lousy, heartless, cruel bastard. At some point, I don't remember how long, my sense of time was totally gone at that moment. In any case, it seemed like an eternity to me. He had enough and let go of me. I couldn't cry at first. I was just scared and shocked. When he had left and his nasty laughter had fallen silent, and when I was alone again, I screamed very loudly at first, and although I was already totally exhausted, I exhausted myself even more with crying, running around, tearing through my hair. I hoped it would just be a dream, but no matter how many times I hit my head, the memories have remained, and so has the feeling. The blows were not even enough to relieve the pain in the soul and body. I felt so dirty, my whole body itched, I felt so sick. I had the feeling that he was still there and would come back in a moment. His smell was everywhere. I never noticed it so strong, and it was so terrible. I couldn't even... At some point I must have collapsed. Glacio found me the next day in the morning and took care of me. He was with me for 3 days and didn't leave me alone. He was the only one who believed me or listened to me at all and didn't laugh at me. Sasha had to take a break again. She wiped away her tears again, but she couldn't control her shaky voice anymore. Cheyenne was speechless and too shocked to think. Her friend told her life in such detail that she really empathized and cried silently herself. This must have been so incredibly terrible. I would have never thought that something like this happened to her. Poor Sasha. At least Glacio was with her. But, oh no, I already know some of what comes next. At some point his wife comes into play and he hasn't been with her so much anymore. How could he betray Sasha and leave her alone, after everything she's been through? Now I might understand the reason, even before she goes on to tell me why she hates him so much. But maybe there is something else. When I see this Agamemnon for the first time in my whole life, I will have no pity for my enemy. Sasha seemed to have collected herself to some extent because she continued to speak in a shaky voice. Glacio was all what I had. He was able to take away my physical pain, but the mental have stayed. Agamemnon soon made sure that he was less with me. The icicle now had to work in his father's healing practice and was there almost all day, every day. He didn't want to give up his research because the luminium deficiency was getting worse and worse, and he was only with me in the evening, for a few minutes. At some point when I was 15, he couldn't get any further with such a strange formula and spent every free minute in the royal library in the castle. During that time, there were days when I didn't even get to see him. When I was allowed to go out with him, he sent me off alone because he had to work or research. And as if that wasn't enough, Genevieve, who worked as a secretary to her father and his healing practice, and her mother, who ran the pharmacy, put all the paperwork on Glacio because she allegedly didn't understand the stuff and didn't know her way around. But I know for sure that this was just an excuse. She has always mastered it since she was 16. All just so that he spends less time with me. Then came the damn experiment. That was 2 weeks after Glacio did not get any further with his strange formula. A researcher came to me and got me out of my cell, then took me to 2 of his colleagues in an experimental room and tied me to a metal couch so that all my joints were already in pain. Then they first injected me with some strange liquid and then locked me in the machine that Glacio had designed. I didn't notice much of what the thing did to me. I only remember that I was about to fall asleep and warm white, so no light, flowed around me. This was luminium from some dead animals and humans, which had already been transformed into unphysical by this machine. The only problem was that the structure did not change and my body rejected the aluminium. But there was so much pressure in the small room in the machine where I was that my aluminium structure changed underneath. The machine then got out of control due to my physical instability. Some of the unphysical aluminium was mixed with mine and messed up my whole body. The machine could convert the corpses into unphysical aluminium, but it couldn't change the structure any further. So the genetics of the old bodies were still a few % in it, and it didn't have the ability to adapt to my body. That was the point at which Glacio got stuck. The machine is an accelerated form of cadaver processing, but incomplete. The only thing that would come out of it are demons. I'm kind of a mixture of demon and human since the experiment. That's why the shape-shifting, and that's why I don't like it so much. But I prefer to call it a mixture of animal and human. Both designations are partly correct, according to Glacio. He just didn't manage to find the formula for automatic aluminium structure transformation.